Right. What do you think, Olivia? Should we get going?
Going, I think.
Okay, so welcome everyone to Open Democracy Action's How to Testify at the New Hampshire Legislature in 2026 training. We're calling it Raise Your Voice. And if you haven't yet, feel free to drop in the chat where you're zooming in from, what your name is, have you testified before, what's your experience level, and we'll get going. So we're first going to start off with a land acknowledgement. Open Democracy acknowledges that we do our work on Ndakina, the unceded homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We honor the land and waterways and the people who have stewarded Ndakina throughout the generations and continue to do so today. And I'll pass it to Olivia.
Great. Thank you, Kaylee. I'm Olivia Zink, Executive Director. And we got our little graphic of how a bill becomes a law. And so if you've watched this cartoon, it's very similar in New Hampshire. A bill is introduced. So a House bill is introduced in the House and a Senate bill is introduced in the Senate. Both bodies refer bills to the standing committee. Every bill that is sponsored has a public hearing. Then the committee sometimes does it the day of, but most of the time does it the following week. We'll have an executive session on a bill. That means the committee will vote on the bill. Then a full House or full Senate vote will happen. So the bill gets voted on twice. There's recommendations of ought to pass or inexpedient to legislate, or they can retain a bill. They can do a couple of different things, but the whole body has to vote on that. If the bill is ought to pass, it does move over to the other body. So the Senate bills move to the House and the House bills move to the Senate. If a bill passes both bodies, then it is enrolled and sent to the governor. Bef Bills that are enrolled, the lawyers look at them first, and if there has to be any changes to the bills, the House Speaker has to sign off on it, and the Senate President signs off on it before it goes to the governor's desk for approval for an either veto or a signature. This is a fun graphic of how a bill becomes a law in New Hampshire. And if you ever go to the State House, the visitor's office gives out these cartoons. So you can stop by and pick it up. But we'll also make sure to send a link to the cartoon as a follow-up because we think it's a really awesome way to understand all 22 steps in how a bill becomes a law here in New Hampshire.
Yes, so there are a couple of ways that you can make your voice heard ahead of even testifying during the public hearing. So at the public hearing, you can testify in person. You could also submit it online before midnight that night. You can sign in person, which is not, writing anything down and speaking. That is just to register your position for the formal record. Um, and you can also email or call committee members ahead of time. Ahead of the full House and Senate sessions, you can email and call your own representatives. And ahead of when the bill goes to the governor's desk for their final sign off or veto, you can definitely email and call the governor. And Open Democracy Action, we usually put out you join email links that make it super fast and easy. So you can send all these emails. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation as well. But also a really important point to note on this slide is that it's always important to build a relationship with your representatives and try to have conversations in person because most of the time those are going to be the ones that are the most impactful. Now we're going to move on to something very important for testifying at the State House is knowing how to navigate the Gen Court website. That is where all the bills and everything about the state of New Hampshire lives.
And that is gc.nh.gov.
Thank you, Olivia. So, how to find your representatives and their contact information. You'll first go to the homepage of gc.nh.gov. They make it really easy. Contact a representative. You can scroll down, select your town, and then it'll bring you who your state reps are and also who your state senator is.
And notice that there are um, both your base district and your flotarial district. So oftentimes people just contact their state representatives, their base district one, but you oftentimes have a representative and a base representative. So you want to make sure to contact all of your state representatives when you do that.
Exactly.
District 4, there's 3 representatives, and then there's another one in District 18 for this town. Mm.
How to find your bill. If you know the bill number you're looking for, you can simply scroll down on the homepage and type it in along the left side here. There is advanced bill search, but typically the current bill search will work. If you're looking for a bill in years past, that's when you could use advanced. And then you can scroll down and it'll bring you to the bill's docket. You can see where this bill has been, who sponsored it, who's the prime sponsors. You can see where it is now and where it's heading, as well as the amendments and all the versions of the bill. And here is how to check the House and Senate meeting schedule. You go from the homepage, House meeting schedule, and then there's the Senate meeting schedule. And I chose this one as an example just because there is a public hearing scheduled for us to view. So the Senate session was today. And then if we go to next week, we can see there is a session scheduled for next Tuesday. And these are all of the bills that are scheduled. You can see where it is, what the bills are, and then you can also sign in remotely from this tab here. And we'll go in more detail on how exactly to sign in. I'll pass it to Olivia.
Great. So there's a different version to how to sign in for testimony on House bills. So as you can see, you're going to go to the tab Committees, and then you'll enter in your name and contact information. You have to know the date of the committee that's being heard. Once you select that date, then you drop down and you select the committee. You want to say your position on the bill, whether you oppose. It also asks you if you're a person or not. No, I know, I'm sorry, I'm not going as fast as the video. And then there's a portion to upload testimony. The Senate bill sign-in, remote sign-in is slightly different. You just go to Senate Home and go to the committees and you can remote sign-in sheet. So that's where you click. You again have to select the date and then, submit your committee, choose the bill you want to sign in on. Then I am and you member of the public, you're representing yourself. You support, oppose, or are neutral on a bill. And then there is no place for you to send your proposed testimony. You have to email that directly to the members of the committee on the Senate portal.
Yes, and there is a way you can click email entire committee. This button wasn't working for me, so I'll circle back if that ever does start to work, but just something to note. So contacting your legislators ahead of a vote. You always want to identify yourself as a resident of your town, whether you're contacting them via email or via phone or in person. Always include the bill number and a brief description of the bill. They might not know, all the hundreds of bills that there are. Be clear about which position you would like the legislator to take. There's either support or oppose and why. Thank them for their public service and respectfully request that they consider all of your points. And then, as I mentioned before, you can use our email tool to quickly send these messages to your representatives. We typically send at least one out in each of our Friday action emails that come out weekly. This one you can all use later or visit our action page or use it when we send the presentation to you to email your reps to vote no on HB 1300, New Hampshire's mid-decade redistricting bill, which is coming up for a public hearing soon on January 20th. So everybody be thinking of your arguments against that while we go through this presentation. It is typically best to call legislators in the evening before 8 p.m. or on weekends. Keep in mind, many are working additional jobs. If possible, call their cell phone. Messages left at their offices, particularly in the House, can be missed. And that's why it's always good to form a relationship with your reps. Keep in mind that senators have staff members that answer phones and go through messages, while state reps do not. And I'll pass it to Olivia.
Great. So we sort of covered a little bit of this before, but the public hearing is the point where you have an opportunity to speak. It's really the only opportunity where you can speak to all of the committee members. The bill is first introduced by the prime sponsor. Typically, they let the legislators speak on the bill first. And then the committee hears testimony from anyone who wants to speak. Some hearings are scheduled for 10 minutes. Some committees are scheduled hearings for a longer period of time. Um, I know some committees have the lobbyist or people with orange badges speak last and let general public speak first, and some committees don't. Um, At executive sessions, that is the opportunity for the House and Senate to talk to each other. So no public testimony is accepted unless the chair invites like the Secretary of State or a department head to answer questions that might arise if they're in the room. The full House and Senate sessions is where all 400 state representatives and all 24 senators vote on the bill. The bill's title is read. The committee has a report that's printed in the calendar. There are parliamentary inquiries given before votes. Some votes are done as roll call votes, so you can see how everyone votes. And some are division votes where it's harder for you to see, and some are just yay or nay, and they all kind of scream loudly. Um, Sessions are often held during the day on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and they're all live streamed. Also, public hearings are live streamed, and executive sessions are live streamed. So all of that is available to be watched. You can watch it live, or you can watch it back at a later date if you can't watch it live. When you're writing testimony, you always want to lead your testimony. The first sentence you want to give in your written testimony is, I urge the committee either ought to pass or I urge the committee to kill this bill inexpedient to legislate. And it's good to repeat the bill number, but you don't always have to, but it's good to include that in your written testimony as your first sentence. Sometimes I bold that, like, I oppose this bill or I support this bill. Um, it's also important for the committee to know immediately where you stand, and you want to focus on what's in the bill, not the bill sponsors or things that are related to the bill. It's like what this bill is really trying to do. The best testimony I have seen is when you are able to start with common ground. Both Republican, Democrats, and undeclared voters find this a hard thing, or this impacts, and you can share a common value or a common statement. Compelling stories are really what helps move the needle. I once shared a story about a voter in a nursing home that had a Maine driver's license, about a bill that was going to remove out-of-state driver's license, and said, this voter who's in a nursing home is still lives here in New Hampshire and is not going to go out and get a New Hampshire driver's license. This bill would make it hard for them to vote. So those personal stories or compelling stories um, show how the bills impact real people. It's always good to be clear and concise. I say 3 points. Make your points. Um, try to make 3 points in a testimony. Don't try to give a laundry list of reasons why something is bad. Um, and it is also okay to, your last sentence, I urge, I strongly support this bill, or you know, for these reasons that I stated, please kill this bill, or ITL, which is inexpedient to legislate. And so it's always good to sort of start with that and end with that. So you're repeating your position on the bill. When you're writing testimony, we kind of broke this out. There are the things I just said are sort of universal. But I think when you're trying to support a bill, yeah, Lois, I'm happy to take your question. Oh, you can unmute.
So my question is, so basically when you send in a testimony, during the public hearings, do they read everyone's testimony out loud? What is the process of reading it?
So, when you submit written testimony, it is just submitted for the record. Legislators read it on their own, or they don't read it on their own. So it's always good when you can go in person, or if you know somebody who's going to the State House, say, hey, would you mind referencing my testimony when you give your testimony? Um, so that it actually gets read out loud. I've talked to a few state reps, one who tells me, I read every bit of testimony. And then another state rep said, I wish I had time to read every piece of testimony, but I honestly don't go, I pay more attention to the testimony that's given in person. Um, but also, I know that it's hard for young people and for others to get to the State House in the middle of the day. And so, if you can only do written testimony, that's still good. But if you have an advocate friend who's going, just also include. I have oftentimes gone to the podium with 6 different written testimonies, and I'll read a sentence or two from each of these testimonies so that they know that there's other voters out there that care about a bill. So if I'm ever going to testify on a bill, I'm always happy to take other people's written testimony with me. Thanks, Lois, for that great question. Um, so
Olivia, I have a question.
sure.
You said that they have very limited time that they allot for testimony. What happens if 10 people want to testify at 3 minutes each and they've only given 10 minutes for testimony?
They go over.
Oh, so will they
So
last as
yeah,
long as there is?
so if you have a bill scheduled at 10:10 and they're still hearing the bill at 10 o'clock, then they're not going to start the next hearing until 10:15 or 10:20 for the most part. And then the whole day gets thrown off. So if you're going for a bill at 11 o'clock, sometimes they catch up. But oftentimes, I will say the senators typically do it. They can't start a bill until it is the posted time that it's posted. So I think the reason they stack them, sometimes a committee chair, if they see 50 people want to testify on a bill, they'll say, we're going to limit everybody for 2 minutes or something like that. If there's a lot of people in the room, sometimes they'll limit the time allotted for people to talk. But our recommendation is not to go more than 2 or 3 minutes anyway when you're giving testimony. So yeah, be prepared for them not to be on time schedule. But we also urge you to show up a few minutes before the committee so you can, get into the room and fill out everything that you need to fill out. So for bills you support, always explain who benefits from the bill and how, whether it's voters, students, workers. Highlight what this bill fixes, the problem it's whether it closes a loophole or modernizes the system or reduces confusion or costs. Um, and also reinforce any facts you have. Again, stories matter too, but I would avoid giving more than, two or three statistics. You could just, because if you rattle off a lot of statistics, it's really tough. Um, for bills you oppose, now, man, oh man, this is where I have fun. You pick the you are like, this bill doesn't solve a problem. Why, like you want to make strong arguments for them not to move this forward. So this bill creates harm. This bill creates barriers. This bill increases confusion. You really want to make sure you're explaining the consequences that this bill might have, or unintended consequences the bill might have, how it could impact a certain voter, or rural communities different than urban communities. You want to point out those things. Or you could also reference, you know, this bill really needs to be amended because um, I don't think the bill sponsor realized, this or that are the problem. So maybe study this bill, and make sure you get the language correct. So those are our tips and tricks on sort of bills you support and bills you oppose, in writing your testimony, because I think you want to look at bills slightly differently, for bills you're trying to advance and for bills you're just saying, this is a real bad idea, please don't do it. Kaylee provided two examples of testimony. Kaylee, do you want to speak to sort of what you do? You always want to name you. I always like to put dates on my committee testimony, towards the top of the page, so you know what date it's submitted. You want to say, testimony in support or in opposition of a bill. I typically say the chairman's name, good morning, Barry, and members of the Election Law Committee, or good morning, Chairman Gray. If you don't know the chairman's name for a committee, that's okay. Or you can ask us and we'll tell you how to find it. The first sentence, um, Kaylee says, I'm a voter in Durham. So she introduces herself slightly, um, in kind of her first little bit. But as you see, two or three paragraphs, one page of testimony. And what I really love about Kaylee's testimony is she hyperlinks. So if she's citing data and facts, she puts the link in there. So if a legislator wants to click more and read the report she's citing, they can.
Yes, and you'll be able to take a closer look at these if you want to look at the example after. We are going to send the presentation afterwards.
And Andrew, since they're images, we're happy to send you the testimony so that they can be screen reader available too.
Exactly, yes. So we want to make sure that if you're testifying in person this year, you don't show up at the wrong place. Um, New this year, the Legislative Office Building is closed for renovations. Senate hearings will continue to operate from the State House, but House hearings will move to One Granite Place, which is still in Concord, but it's about a mile away from the State House. That being said, it's very important to know whether you are testifying at a House or a Senate hearing. And you can distinguish that by checking their docket, just like we showed you how to see the bill on the general court website. And if you want even more in-depth instructions, the New Hampshire Disability Rights Center has great directions for getting to the temporary meeting rooms once you have entered the building. I have put them right here.
And the good news is if you're going to One Granite Place, they have a great big parking lot and you don't have to pay a meter. So, um, you're not in downtown Concord. So there's a great big parking lot. So don't worry about, do you have quarters for the meter? But unfortunately, Senate hearings, you still have to make sure you have, your parking meter paid if you park right downtown.
Exactly. So testifying in person, once you've done all your research, you get to the place, you're ready to speak, you'll need to first sign in. So each body's method is slightly different, but each is going to ask you to identify yourself, ask whether you're in favor or opposed to the bill, and how long you'll need to speak. In the House, you'll want to grab a pink card. It's literally like a pink note card. You can fill out all that information on it and then pass it to the committee chair if the meeting has not begun, or if the meeting has begun and you don't want to interrupt it, just pass it to the member closest to you and they can pass it down to the chair. The chair will be the one calling people up to testify. And if you do not wish to speak, you can always sign in on a sheet and record your position. And for the Senate, you need to fill out the sign-in sheet and just check the box if you wish to speak. So as I mentioned, the chair will call people up. So it'll first be the prime sponsor of the bill, introducing it, saying their reasoning for why they want it. And then elected officials will get the chance to speak. Then members of the public, and then lobbyists go last. You want to ensure that your microphone is on when you sit down. A red light will be on. Some people ahead of you might turn it off or they might leave it on. And then, as Olivia said, you want to highlight your top 3 points. Don't read the whole document if you know that it's likely going to go over your allotted 2 to 3 minutes. Brevity is often at times much appreciated by the committee members. And if someone has already brought up a point you had, acknowledge them, acknowledge their point, but don't repeat it. And then make sure to bring 20 copies of your testimony so each member of the House committee gets one. And then if you're testifying on a Senate bill, bring 6 copies so each Senate member gets one. And for handling questions from the committee, you can choose to not take questions at all. Simply tell the committee at the end of your testimony that you'll not be taking questions. This is totally your call, and oftentimes legislators don't mind either way. Andrew, you have a question?
Yeah. Does it help or hurt your position that you're testifying on if you decide not to take questions?
I think it depends on the situation. Olivia, I'll defer to you.
Um, I sometimes will say I'm not taking questions, like if I'm the last person called in a hearing, so that the committee can and answer. I also think it's like, what depending on what you're testifying on. Andrew, if you're talking about your experience as a blind voter, like that is an easy question for you to answer. But then if they ask you a question that's like a policy question in the weeds, um, you also can say, I can learn more about that question and get back to you with a follow-up email. So it's okay either way. You know, I think it's important, especially if it's the first time you've ever testified, you can say, this is the first time I've ever testified and I don't feel comfortable taking questions. Um, so I think it also is so dependent on the situation.
Mhm. Exactly. So totally up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. And do note that if a question is phrased in a confusing manner, you're like, what are they talking about? It's totally okay to ask a clarifying question before you answer it. And again, brevity is key and the legislators appreciate it. So be brief in your responses. And so you are able to multitask and turn your testimony into a letter to the editor. You can reuse it. Don't stop at the hearing. Your testimony can reach thousands more as an LTE just by recycling what you already wrote. You can localize it by connecting the issue back to your own town or district. Be sure to reference the bill number and mention where it is in the legislative process to alert people when's the next time that they can take action on it. Make sure you might just have to do some tightening to make sure your word count is within the publication's word count parameters. This typically varies from 150 to 250 depending on the publication. We do have linked here, you'll get it in the presentation afterwards, a document that has all of the New Hampshire publications, or a lot of them, and their word count limits and how to submit an LTE to them. And then at the end of your LTE, be sure to leave readers with a call to action. Encourage readers to pay more attention to the matter, contact their representatives, attend a protest or a visibility, etc. You can also advocate via social media. Olivia saw this today. Chairman Barry, he is the chairman of the House Election Law Committee. He put on X that anyone wishing to follow along in House election law can do so here. And he actually posted the bills with the schedule for their public hearing before the general court website did. So we got a little sneak preview. So it definitely pays to follow your legislators on social media, although sometimes you might not like everything they post. But you can also share our graphics, anything from our social media, anything we send in our action alerts. These keep the ball rolling and keep the momentum going in any advocacy campaign.
And I've also heard people, your testimony is recorded. You can grab a clip of the recorded testimony and share that as well. So lots of other ways to get the word out. This is kind of a boring slide, but each calendar gives the House and Senate deadlines. I think it's important for you to know that if a bill has a fiscal note, costs money, which means it costs money, they have between now and February 12th to have a public hearing on that. And February 19th is their last day of a bill that's going to a second committee. So most of those are bills that have an FN next to them. For bills that don't cost money, March 5th is the last day for them to deal with House bills. Crossover is March 26th. This is when all of the House bills are acted on and they move over to the Senate. And then there's all the Senate, deadlines of when, Senate has to deal with the bill. And then it takes us into like incumbents running for office, filing bills for 2026. So all of those days are important dates to remember. And again, this is just more for reference. So kind of what the cadence of the House schedule will be. NHPR has a great story on how to testify, and it references New Hampshire Citizens Counts tips and tricks on registering to vote. The Gen Court website is super useful, but a little bit hard to digest. So we're happy to help you find your state representative. We did one of these trainings one year, and then somebody reached out to me and said, I don't know what ward I live in. And I was like, okay, let's help you find your ward number so that you can find your state representative. So there's a few things that are not necessarily intuitive. The New Hampshire Municipal Association has a great glossary of terms. We've linked that there. There's also a blue book, which tells a bio of all the legislators. Another resource on how to submit a letter to the editor from our friends at Sierra Club. So we want to talk about a couple of important bills that are coming up on January 20th for open democracy. House Bill 1300 changes the congressional district. We oppose this bill and will encourage people to come at 10:10 to testify on that bill and then stay for the 10:20 hearing, which is House Bill 1487, creating an independent commission for redistricting maps ahead of the 2030 census. We also have another bill that we support, House Bill 1600, requiring the DMV to allow you when you're renewing your driver's license or non-driver's identification card to have people register to vote, which is a very cool idea. And many other states have that system. So if you're able to come in the afternoon, and then there's a bunch of campaign finance bills in the afternoon. So another bill we support around um, requiring political committees to verify um, their sort of no activity or if they've spent less than $1,000. And then a really innovative campaign finance bill, House Bill 1838, which establishes the voter-owned elections fund, which would give every voter $25 to give to the candidate of their choice. So there's a lot of fun. I think there's 13 bills on election law this day. So the day is full of election law bills. We can take the slides down and have a conversation. I know there's some slides, there's some questions in the chat. I saw them coming in as we were speaking, but anyone feels free to unmute and ask questions too.
I have another question. Is it possible to search for pending bills on general topic? Like if you wanted to see everything that has to do with environment, even if it falls under a non-environment committee, can you search by kind of keywords?
Yep, so you want to search, so you can search the bill text. So she can put in environment and see what comes up. So the problem is if the bill deals with climate change and doesn't have the word environment, it's not helpful, but it shows you 71 bills that had the word environment in. So it might not capture all of those things, or especially if you're trying to put, you know, so you sort of want to sort of pick a keyword. Yeah, so when you put in climate, 8 bills show up. So, um, it depends on your keyword.
Yeah, and I'll just add while I'm screen sharing, you can also, the way to tune in and watch the streaming of either the public hearings or the full House or Senate sessions, you can click, it's the first thing right here under session information. You can click either of these and it'll bring you right to the YouTube page and you'll be able to watch it.
Andrew asks a question because sometimes House and Senate bills, committees have bills that are similar that are scheduled about the same time. And we used to run up and down the stairs. And now that they're a mile apart, um, it is going to be a challenge to get back and forth between bills that are heard at the State House and bills that are heard at Granite Place because they're in a different um, place. So actually, Lois is on from AFSC. Lois, if you want to post the American Friends Service Committee State House Watch, that would be great. Open Democracy does, so you can sign up for the AFSC State House Watch. But also Kaylee does a great sort of election law Friday recap too. And yes, we will share the slides. I'm just going back through the questions. Feel free to ask any questions if you have any.
I've
Yeah,
got
go
a
ahead, Kevin.
question. So if you're following, let's say, everybody that's on the election committee, um, and like January 20th, I'm slotted all day with clients, with patients, so I'm not going to make it. But if I were following them and they make reference to it, does it have any impact if I respond what I feel like in their engage in the conversation in social media for the people that are on the committee in social media? Do you feel like that has an impact?
I think it does. It raises the temperature. We know the chairman of Election Law Committee is on social media. He's a Republican. So you kind of have to sort of gauge what you bait him with on social media, but it's also important. Some of the members are old and not on social media, so I would say maybe the younger state reps are more engaged in those digital debates. But I think if you have a strong opinion about the redistricting thing, even if it's 3 or 4 sentences, like you don't even have to fill a whole page. If we're going to the committee, we'd be happy to print out copies of the testimony and at least hand them out to members of the committee for you on the bills that we're following.
Okay. Do you think that the social media, like the head of the um election trying to jury rig elections committee, that's what you called it, right? Um uh does it ever get contentious on social media?
Yes.
Okay. Because at first I thought you said bait, and then I realized you said debate. And I'm like, I'm a pretty good baiter and a debater. So I was just curious if there, because sometimes those conversations can bring in lots of other people, especially if you're tagging other people.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was my kind of my thought process. I like to be a pain in as many ways as possible.
Go ahead, Kate.
So, I know there's some people on this call who are particularly interested in immigration issues, and I'm particularly nerdy about housing issues. And then I know other people who am close to, they're all about the education list. So it's like advocacy list here is very much election law, campaign finance. I also, League of Women Voters will be on that kind of thing. And I do State House Watch, although I was sort of forgotten about it, so glad to get that link again. But I'm kind of wondering if we can crowdsource. Um, are there other groups that do, like for some of those other subjects, the same kind of bill tracking so that people can get, like, I want my Friday update on what are all the things that could have to do with immigration, citizenship status,
Yeah,
I,
so
um,
AFSC tracks that.
that's okay. So that's AFSC. And then it
AFSC.
goes back to Beata's question. Are there any like, oh man, if you're trying to track climate, who's checking through those thousands of bills, you know? Do you see what I'm saying? Ways
Yep, so
to
Sierra
support.
Club or League of Conservation Voters. I'm not sure actually what they put out each week. Amy's here from 603 Equality if you care about LGBTQ
LGBTQ.
issues.
Yeah.
Their New Hampshire network actually is a great one that does environmental issues. Thank you, Kate, for putting that in there. Um, is it
Mhm.
Fair Funding?
Yes,
That
it's the New Hampshire Fair Funding. That's one
yeah,
of the ones I
yeah,
was
that
thinking
does
of. Yeah.
education bills each year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Ursula, for this Forest Society. If you care about land conservation, um, New Futures is another good advocacy group that does
Mhm.
some work too on some health related bills. So there are lots out there, and I think if you're looking for something in particular, feel free to email Kaylee and I, and we'll be happy to introduce you to the folks we know
Mhm.
that are following these issues. There's a great group on housing if you care about housing.
Yeah. I'm
That
wondering if it would be helpful if we had a little, resource tab in Open Democracy Action.
you know what I
It's
might do? I might ask Louise at Kent Street and see if she has something already
yeah,
um, set up for Kent Street folks,
yeah.
Kent Street
But do you see
volunteers.
what I'm saying? It just could be. I see Beata nodding, like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to say that like groups like Open Democracy and New Futures and others on immigration, they're here to help and support people who want to testify. And so feel
Hmm.
free to use other advocacy organizations as resources. If you're going to write testimony on gerrymandering, Kaylee will proofread it for you if you want it. Or should I make this point? Or, hey, I know you've been to this committee before. What are the personalities on this committee? Like, what should I be looking out for? Like, those are great questions to ask other advocates that have testified on a bill,
Mhm.
especially if you're going for the first time. And the other thing I recommend too is watching a committee hearing. Like, even if it's last year's committee hearing, you can sort of get a chance to sort of see how that committee is acting, reacting in real life.
Mm.
So something that, okay, yes. My my question is that something like they're trying to redistrict.
Mhm.
There's got to be a cost to doing that.
Yep.
And I would assume that that would be an achievable, that's a number that somewhere we could get our hands on of like what is the proposed cost that this redistricting that they're trying to
Mm.
ram through is going to do.
Thanks for that question. So, bills that cost money are supposed to have fiscal notes, and I'll see if Kaylee can pull up the fiscal note on the redistricting bill. So at the end of bills, they normal some of the bills don't their fiscal notes aren't attached quite yet because the departments haven't written them on all of the bills. But I think we were looking at one. Um, some of them are very clear, like this costs $50,000. Some of the fiscal notes say they're undeterminable. We don't know how many lawsuits there might be, or, we can't determine how much it's going to cost. But I think it's also um, really important to read the fiscal notes on the different bills so you understand how much it costs. And I will say that the department heads that write the fiscal note, so here's the fiscal note. I don't know if you can make that any bigger. Um, so this is totally unhelpful. An indeterminable cost, $2.5 million. Um,
Mm.
But
Oh, but you can
to
also read the methodology about how they created the Secretary of State, you know, has to launch an education campaign to tell people who's in a different district, which, will cost money for printing and, so they do sort of give you a methodology. But then, I feel like the $2.5 million is like, we're going to put an estimate on how much this is going to cost. Um,
because I think of in maybe ways that of to be able to stand there and quote, respectfully, the chair, you have 5,400 times talked about how we have to cut back the money we're spending in New Hampshire. We're overspending money, and you're supporting something that is unnecessary for 2.5 million to hopefully change what the legislature looks for. Can you justify that? That
mhm,
you're spending 2.5 million when we can't afford services for programs for children?
right.
I
So
mean,
I think I hear your point, and I think it's also really important to make points like that in but they don't answer your questions. Like, so if you propose a rhetorical question to the committee, they're not going to answer your rhetorical question. So,
I don't need them to.
right, you're
I
just going
need
to
it
make.
on tape and I need it to be heard by everybody that they're
Mhm.
spending 2.5 million on an ego project.
Mm.
I don't expect them to answer. I don't expect them to ever answer honestly if they did. So like, well, I don't have, I have low expectations. I just wonder if there's a value to it, or is that confrontational likely to get you uninvited to come do testimony again, or are they not allowed to do that?
They're not allowed to uninvite you unless you like make a threaten their lives, I think, or something like that. It's a public building, everyone's allowed to join. Lois asked a question about do testimonies always have to be in a format? And I say no, they don't always have to be in a format. Um, I was taught to always put the date and put the bill number and whether you oppose it, and to always address it, dear chairman of the committee and members of the committee. Um, that was something I was taught as a best practice, but I think um, people can format them differently. There is one senator who always likes their uh, testimony three hole punched. So if you three hole punch, you get bonus points because they put them in a binder. Um, so you just sort of have to but they can, so you don't have, so the senator doesn't have to, you know, get to a three hole point. Andrew, you have a question.
Yeah, it's a little similar to the last person's question. I know you said people can't get uninvited, but can they get shut down before they start to testify for any given reason? Like,
Yeah.
like for instance, say they start to talk about something, or they start to ask a question, and it's in a format that the chair doesn't like because they're not fond of the topic or something.
Yes, Liz Tancarelli once called election deniers, in her testimony, and Chairman Gray shut her down and was like, please do not use that vocabulary. So there are times where the chairman can interrupt you if you say something that they don't like. And I've seen it happen before. Um, and maybe Chairman Gray is particularly uh, different than some other chairs. So each chair has their different flavor on how they run their committee. But um, also, yes, thank you, Kaylee. They also say, please stick to the topic at hand. Don't go off topic. Like we're talking about this bill and this topic. Um, so
Hmm.
Just a follow up to that then. Is it good to reference other things in your testimony if it's related, or is it better to not do that?
I
Like,
think it depends, Andrew. I mean, I think um, it really depends on what you're testifying about. Um, so
say I were testifying on a topic relating to funding for something like, I don't know, funding for voting. Would it be worth mentioning that the budget is really tight because of, say, the Education Freedom Account funding, or is that usually liable to get you into trouble?
I would avoid sort of those hot button topics. Um, especially because especially um, you know, if you want something funded for voter education, like there is money in the Help America Vote Act fund. And so it's probably better to say, the federal government has given us some funds to fund this. I would not sort of pit other issues against each other. Um, it's probably um, because you don't know all of the positions that the legislators have about those issues. We had polls. Kaylee, do you want to launch a poll?
Yes, I do. Let's see.
Mary, go ahead with your question while we're launching this poll.
Yeah, I actually didn't have a question. I just wanted to thank you, Olivia, and Kaylee for this. It's so good and helpful, so well put together. I really appreciate your experience and knowledge. I've learned a lot. Thank you.
No, thank you. Great. Yeah, I'm totally shout outs of things you've learned. Like I think that's also fun to end a training with too, of like, here's a tip I picked up. So we know what, um,
Yes, you guys are so modest. No one has said they're a pro. It looks like 50% said none and 50% said a little bit.
Great. Thanks for answering that question. We have one last question for you, I think, a second question.
So I'll share those results. Can all take a peek?
Yeah, great.
Oops, I hit X.
And Andrew, I'd love to know if these polls work for you.
They do, but they take a little bit of extra time because of how I have to interact with them.
Oh, so the question is have you signed on a bill and people have said no and most people have signed on both in House and Senate bills, so great.
Oh, did I miss a question?
This is a new one up, Andrew. Got 29% no, 12% yes for House bill, 59% yes, both House and Senate bills. So that's awesome. You guys got
Oh,
that experience.
oh, weird. That didn't give me that option. Huh.
Oh.
Oh
Just
no.
said yes or no. Weird.
This is our first time trying these polls, so
Well, and also the screen reader interacts with it differently too. So it's always thank you for sharing that feedback, Andrew.
yes, sorry
Um,
about that.
Kaylee, your last post said Tuesdays at 4 and Tuesdays at 2 to discuss election law.
You can tell I'm multitasking. Tuesdays at 4 and Thursdays at 2. Or
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Thursdays.
Not trying to be a pain.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Also, I just want to add one little tip that I was told by a state rep. I don't know if it's still true or not, but if you want to sign in remotely and lead testimony, there's an option where you can either upload a PDF or just type something into the box. And apparently it's better to to upload a PDF because it gets a higher position in the list of testimony, especially when it's multiple pages.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew, for that tip. That's an awesome tip. And also, if you've had trouble PDFing things, let us know and we can help you PDF a document too, in order to submit your testimony. Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today and interacting and asking questions and joining us in the chat and with our polls. It was really great to be with you all tonight. Kaylee will send a follow-up email with the slides and the resources. And we appreciate you being here tonight. Thanks. And also feel free to call or email Open Democracy if you have questions that come up tomorrow or when you first start writing testimony, or try to explore the Gen Court page because we're here for you, to help you along. And Andrew sometimes calls me for a ride to the State House, so do that too.
Yes. Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you at the State House or at One Granite Place soon. Have a great
Thank
night,
you,
everyone.
everyone. Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Much.